It is my great pleasure to introduce our last or our last keynote of the day, and then we'll have one or a couple last activities after that. Our last keynote of the day and of the conference as a whole. Benvenutto is a creative designer and entrepreneur focused on sustainable and innovative solutions to humanity's challenges. After pursuing interests in music, film, innovation, and fashion, she ultimately developed a love for design in all forms. This passion drove her to co-create Spriteley, a metaverse startup with the goal of replacing Facebook. Thank you very much. And with that, we want that.
Thank you.
That was a bit of ad lib, but there you go. Koii.
That was an ad lib, by the way. It's the goal is to bring people together, but aren't those a little bit synonymous? Cool. Hi Toronto. Hi Queer Tech. I'm so happy to be here. My name's Koii, and or from Berkeley, California. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the 5 building blocks of leadership, specifically from sort of a mindfulness approach and sort of a storytelling approach, with some statistics sprinkled throughout as well. So a little bit about me. As Jean-Francois already said, CEO and co-founder of Spriteley, we give users tools to build and explore their virtual identity in the form of these cute little avatars called sprites. Um, cool. So starting off, I want to talk a little bit about finding your trailhead. So before we can talk about the 5 building blocks of leadership, um, well, leaders got to start somewhere. You don't know what you're going to be passionate about, like the moment that you sort of pop into the world, right? So what do I mean by finding your trailhead? I want to start off with kind of a funny question. What do your investors, employees, and community have in common? And really, this could be anybody, like friends, uncle, dog, right? The answer is they're going to be looking to you as a leader, right? To sort of have a deep personal connection with your domain, whether you're a team lead or a founder or an executive director of a nonprofit, it doesn't matter. And so how do you cultivate that connection that's going to carry you through thick and thin and good times, bad times, like crazy challenges where you're just like, are we going to still have a company or a team in a week? Like what's going on? Like how do you build something that robust? Let's talk a little bit about that. Um, this is my friend. It's a circle, or it's actually a sphere, really. And so we're going to do a little bit of mindfulness. Take this beautiful sphere, and if you want to, you can close your eyes even a little bit. But just sort of imagine that it's sort of like half inside you, like you're holding like a big beach ball. It's sort of half inside you, and then the other half is sort of like outside you. Okay? I'll just give you all a moment to sort of like, it's a high energy environment. I'll give you all sort of a moment to picture that. Cool. Okay, we've all got our spheres. So this is sort of what it's like to have a really deep personal relationship with your work. And I want to talk about 2 tools that can help you sort of find your, find your path, find your trailhead, because you've got a big journey ahead of you if you want to be a leader. Let's start with this internal part. So I'm trans. And so for me, my company, Spriteley, right, we're helping people find their true identity. So that was an internal struggle. Like I didn't know that I was a girl, or that I identified as a girl, however you want to say it, until I was 21. So, I lived most of my life just being like, hey guys, what's up? Like, and then at 21, just huge awakening. Like, how could it have taken me so long? That's a question that I still don't really know the answer to. But I looked inwards. Whoops. I looked inwards and looked at the problems that I faced. And when my co-founder and I were building Spriteley in the beginning, it was these problems of giving people tools to build their identity that I just thought there was like no solutions for. It's like everything's like, choose this option or that option. It's like, this isn't how identity works. Like, these aren't really quality tools. Would you pass me my water bottle? Thank you. So that's an example of what it looks like to sort of start with something inwards. And it doesn't have to be something as apparent as that. Like, just ask yourself, like, what problems do I face? Like, when was the last time I was like really upset about something? Like, any of these questions, just being curious um, can lead to something way deeper that's below the surface. And that can be a great start to finding your path, whether it's a company that you want to start or as simple as like where you'd like to volunteer. All of those can be a path that just gets you going towards leadership. So what if you don't really have anything like that? You try being mindful and nothing really comes about, or you have something external that you're super passionate about. Maybe like the environment is a good example. So you can also cultivate the inverse, right? So maybe if you're starting with the exterior, you can look at the problems that your community faces and empathize with the people around you, the problems that they're facing. Like when was the last time that you saw a documentary or you heard a story that really spoke to you and made you just like cry or like beam and glow, you know? In a lot of those stories, like there's a problem at the root of them. Generally, there's a challenge that's overcome. You can try using that as your trailhead to sort of find your path. And then lastly, I like to say, you know, mindfulness is really great, but for some people, there's like some techniques where you kind of just write ideas down and like maybe like that game MASH that we all played as a kid. You know, sometimes you just come up with something random. Even in that scenario, you're going to need this deep personal connection to your work to get through being a leader. Seriously, it's hard. Um, but you can still build that connection, even if it's something that you have no relation to at all. Like maybe it's like I don't know, let's take the environment, for example, right? Okay, go to somewhere where maybe it has beautiful nature and you grew up in a city, experience it. Maybe even go somewhere where nature is threatened and experience what that's like, see what it makes you feel. And then super quickly, you then, okay, boom, now you're on the path to getting this personal connection to your work. Okay, now that we all know what we're going to be doing for the rest of our lives, let's take a look at the building blocks. So first one is integrity. I want to start with this article I found in the Harvard Business Review. I believe they looked at 3,000 companies, and frankly, I'd never seen an article from a publication like that, or MIT Tech Review, whatever, that was just like so certain. They're just like, look, this is how it is. This is the stats. Trust us. It's this. We looked. There's nothing else. This is the truth. And I was like, okay, I get it. I believe you guys. I'll put it in my talk. Chill. And so what do we have here? These three colored lines are three different companies, and each one has a different like highest level of integrity. So like right here, look at this technology. Oh my God, right there, see that? That would be like the most, yeah, highly rated leader. Like, so that's their CEO or executive director, the highest position. Then what we have moving towards the right is that the levels of integrity only decrease. So what is that saying? If you're the leader, whether it's a team, right? So you're like a mid-level manager, or you're like the leader, the CEO, like the one, bringing the whole company together. You will not have employees that are more honest or have more integrity than you. Like, take a second to think about that. It's really interesting. It kind of sounds like bad almost, in the sense it's just like, oh well, I want to surround myself with amazing people, but this is what the stats show. So you have to set a super high bar if you want to have integrity as a building block in your team, organization, etc. Now that we understand that integrity is super important, I want to give you sort of like a tool that I use to think about integrity. Imagine that you're in a storm, right? And you're in a house. Um, Maybe it's like your grandma's house, so it's like full of really delicate things like glassware and I don't know, plates and fine art, right? Um, and yeah. Oh, I'll wait just a moment. Yeah, can we get like a mirror effect going? A dream within a presentation within a presentation. the metaverse. Cool. Thank you so much. The tech team is awesome, by the way. Thank you so much. Um, so yeah, you're in this house and it's a huge storm, and you're not going to be able to save everything, but you're going to be able to save some things. So you're like running around really frantically. You're like, oh my God, like my favorite portrait. Okay, I got it. And oh my God, my favorite mug, right? So integrity is your compass that tells you what you save and why. Okay, so you're just not going to be able to save everything, and that's actually not a bad thing. It sounds intense, and like I'm the CEO of a startup, so it really is like that. It's like a storm always. Um, Even on good days, it's like, it's like the calm after the storm, but it's still like storm season. It's intense. I can't get it across enough. Um, but yeah, you just have to make sure that you're saving the right stuff, and you have to use your own moral compass to decide what gets saved and what doesn't, and kind of like a river rock, turning over and over, getting refined. That storminess, that chaos, that actually refines your vision until you're like, oh, are we going to do like this more profitable like business model, or are we going to use this more sustainable material? Okay, we're not us without the sustainable material. You got it. We'll figure out another thing to like be able to stay afloat, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a tool that I use to think about integrity. And now let's take a look at our next building block. Ooh, it's being feisty. Our next building block, grit. Cool. So grit. At Spriteley, we have like a core values document. No worries. We have a core values document, and the way that we define grit is the idea that we push, we sweat, we grind to get where we need to go, but we don't hurt ourselves or others in the process. So there's an element of balance, right? What's good about grit, like here's the good news, is that it's going to come about naturally when you've got that, our friend the sphere inside you. It's like your best friend, okay? Grit's going to happen naturally. Like if you care about this deeply, it's just you get going like a snowball. You can't really, you just want to see a world with what you're creating in it. Like you're going to be so curious. Grit's going to happen for you. But there's a difference between grit and, oh, I'm up at 5 a.m. twiddling one line of code, and then I wake up the next morning and I rework the entire, like, everything I've done for the whole sprint. Like, how many of you have experienced something like that in your domain? Like, yeah, me all the time. I feel like there should be more hands up, but I'll let you slide. Cool. So it's important when we're talking about grit that we're talking about working smart. And a lot of these situations where, you have situations where founders and teams are working into the 60 to 100-hour week range, it's just not necessary a lot of the time. And the one scenario when it's never ever appropriate is long term. It's just the leading academia says basically after 55 hours, it's as good as nothing in a long term scenario. It's like it just doesn't work. That being said, I want to sort of share a bit of a vulnerable experience from my time as CEO at Spriteley, because I want to illustrate that while these building blocks are great, we don't live in an ideal world. So picture Spriteley in the summer of 2022, so not that long ago, and we basically realized, like, hey, you saw the avatars. We want to create these virtual building blocks that you can like sculpt on your finger in real or with your finger, in real time on your phone, and create together and share them and blah. Turned out that we vastly underestimated the technical challenges to get this to run on iOS. And for anyone who's nerdy, the backend's in Rust, so there's a lot of interesting parsing that happens in between there. So, okay, there came a point where my co-founder and I found ourselves working like 100-hour weeks. And yeah, it was really hard. Like it was a period of like 2 months. And one thing that you're going to be expected to do as a leader is actually buffer, right? So before, like you're like a bucket of water. Like before discomfort or pain reaches your like first employees, like your like main hitters, you kind of have to take on everything you can as a leader. That's a hard part of the job. That being said, I'll get back into the story. What it led to was a situation where I needed to ask my team, who had signed up as individual contributors, I had to ask them to become leaders in their own right. Not in the sense that we were hiring, the next level of company underneath them, but in the sense that they needed to take that sphere and step like, maybe like 2 big steps in like further into that, right? And bring their own creative ambition, work longer hours, etc., to support the vision. Unfortunately, it led to losing a part of the team. And I learned the hard way that, basically I wasn't wrong to open the door for them, but I was entirely wrong to try to push them through it. And at the end of the day, like, you can't create leaders with titles. You can only point out the opening so that the right person can say, like, that's where I want to be. That's really important. And when you're, building a startup, building a team, even at a larger company, whatever it is, like, this was probably one of the most painful experiences of my life, other than sort of the first moments of coming out as trans and coming to terms with my identity. Like, your team is sort of a part of you. Like, you have this circle that's your work. The team is part of that circle. It really hurts. So yeah, you just can't create leaders. You've got to ask for them. Cool. With that being said, let's recognize some of the themes so far. We've got balanced versions of these building blocks, and we've got unbalanced versions. And with that lens, let's take a look at empathy. Okay, despite everything going on in the world right now, this stat makes me super rosy about my awesome generation. 83% of Gen Z would take a job that has a strong culture of empathy over a higher salary. Go Gen Z. Now, what this says to me is that even if you're a shark, okay, it pays to be empathetic. There's just no argument against it. There's a couple points that I want to touch on relating to empathy. We talked about finding your trailhead, so I'm going to continue with this analogy of like a path, right? So you're walking down the trail, and you're sort of like ahead of the pack because you're the leader. And you go around a bend, they can't see you anymore. So you've got a really important job to do. You kind of, I don't know, send up a flare, or like maybe like shout like, hey, like over here to the left, right? And then you have to stop and wait. Because if you don't, no one's really going to know where to go, right? So you have to keep in mind that you've got this sphere, and you've got so much of that inside yourself. So your relationship with what you do is completely unique. No one else has it at all. So you need empathy in order to bring people along for the ride with you. You need to sort of tell them a story. I like to say, like, people don't understand words, they understand stories. That's why, like, sorry doesn't work. So knowing that, yeah, you have to paint a picture for people, help them understand hard decisions. And when you move far ahead, you have to stop and wait for the team to catch up before you go to the next spot. Otherwise, you get, instead of like a nicely fitting jigsaw puzzle, you got like a mess. And then you have to be accountable for that mess. And that's what I want to talk about next, is accountability. So still on empathy here, but let's look at empathy and accountability together. Apologizing is a part of leadership. I made a lot of mistakes as a leader, even in like 1.5 years. It's just more mistakes than like things that go perfectly. And being able to like own up to that and have accountability is super huge. And you need empathy in order to be properly accountable for what you do. So we can all picture, without shouting names, like think of a leader people who are well-known, like celebrities, whatever, famous tech entrepreneurs, think of a leader that you would classify as like slippery. Slippery or like sly, right? So it's probably somebody who they don't say things like, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Then take a moment to see it from the person's perspective whose trust was broken. Because that's really what a mistake is in the end, breaking somebody's trust. And then, they don't say, okay, let's move forward together. Let's create a reality together. Now that we've acknowledged that I was in the wrong, taken accountability for it, I understood what it was like for you. Now let's create together. These are people who they don't do it that way. That's what you need to do. They go, well, now that we have increased data, I've evolved my position slightly on the matter, and we're going to move forward in this direction, and we couldn't have done it any better. It's like, okay, so you never separated yourself from the thing that you're apologizing for. You never apologized for it even. You didn't take a moment to think about what it was like for the person who was hurt by the experience. So that doesn't give them the opportunity to separate you from your past. And then even though you think you might have grown past it, you're just pulling it along with you like dead weight. So in that sense, empathy is crucial to accountability as well. And that's a huge part of being a good leader. Cool. Let's move on to the next building block. Curiosity. Okay, balance in curiosity and unbalanced curiosity. This is from the Spriteley core values, so you can have some fun when you're making your own company. We constantly ask questions and check out just about everything like we're annoying little kids, but we're not annoying little kids. So what we mean here is basically, be curious. Think about things from multiple angles and don't be afraid to ask, but you can't like weigh down the process. Curiosity is the same thing that it's like the engine that keeps us going, but it's also the reason that you're up at 5 a.m. twiddling one line of code when like you're needed to do like a PowerPoint for queer tech that you're just like, oh my God, you know what I mean? So hone it. You need to use mindfulness and discipline and whatever other amazing tools are out there to make sure that you're being curious, using grit in a smart way. This is what honed curiosity looks like. This is a quote from my favorite book from my favorite author, Adam Grant. And so he writes, thinking like a scientist requires searching for reasons why we might be wrong, not for reasons why we might be right. And back to the path analogy, this is the difference between, walking down the path. Oh, like this is the path that's paved. Like this is really easy. Let's keep walking. Like I see that there's other people that are also hiking on this path. That's great. So I think we're in the right place because there's like a lot of people. Oh, a dead end. Oh, they said it's a dead end. Let's just go home, guys. Like no. If you hone curiosity, then you're not just like, oh, I'm like kind of going on this tangent. I'm curious about that. You're actually asking throughout your trip, throughout your hike, like randomly, like spring it on your colleagues just like while you're getting like ice cream, just like, what are we doing wrong? They'll love it. Trust me. Just be like, what are we doing wrong? What can we do better? Like look around you while you're going down that path. And if you get to a dead end, like honing your curiosity, like conscious curiosity, is the difference between, oh, it's a dead end, and like, wait, look over here behind this boulder, guys. Like, we can get through this. Like, there's actually a way to do it. You'll find the most creative solutions by questioning the status quo and finding your own way. And you need, again, our friend, the sphere, you need that deep personal connection in order to have that conscious curiosity. Cool. Okay. Sweet. I think we're ready to move on to the last value, the last building block, which is storytelling. It's what I've been doing this entire time, and what we've actually all been doing since we've got to this conference, since we learned to speak English. So before I get into it, I want to ask you guys a question. What do you think about Snapchat?
Oh, no, like I'm doing
answer, but just like put it in the back of your head. What do you think about Snapchat? Okay, cool. This is me. 2020, I worked at a pizza shop. COVID was like, we're at the point where it's just like, what's going to happen? Like, how deadly is this? What's like, where are we all going to be in the future? Is there a future? And I wasn't too happy at the time, as you might be able to tell by this selfie. And just like everybody else at that time, I turned to social media, whether it was Facebook or like Instagram. Like, oh, I'm going to delete Facebook. Snapchat, Clubhouse, like you name it, like, right? We all did this. It's like, which one is going to bring us together and be our like savior in these dark times? And then we all sort of walked away like, huh, I guess social technology is cool, but it kind of failed. It's not really social, is it? Like, it's not really a replacement for in-person interaction. But, you know, what I did come away with is this amazing thing that if you sit me in front of a computer with a browser open for like more than 10 minutes, I'll just automatically type Facebook. So I guess that's what social media has done for us, right? That's amazing. Or like if you put like a brick in my hand, I just start swiping, like anything, like just like, okay, cool. These are some good things that social media has done. Now, okay, imagine me sitting in my kind of crap apartment. I need to do the dishes, and I'm swiping. I opened Snapchat. I think I opened Snapchat to try to find like deep connection, but you know, I ended up just swiping. Like, okay, cat ears, you know, dog nose, rainbow vomit, and then sort of out of the corner of my eye, because I'm not even doing it consciously, saw this filter. Oh, I'm a girl. So I subconsciously swiped my way into my actual identity at 21 while the world was ending. And yeah, all it took was a filter. All it took was a single filter. So I'm curious, like, what do you think about Snapchat? Is it silly? Is it, you know, for like naughty photos, candid moments with friends? Or is it maybe something more than that? What about social technology as a whole? Did I change your opinion on that? What do you think about, I don't know, maybe it has more potential than we're giving it credit for. Maybe these avatars that we're building can do more than just make a cute virtual selfie. Maybe they can actually help young people figure out who they are before they're 21 and being like, oh, great, I need to rethink my entire life. That's painful, right? So I didn't put any stats up about storytelling because stories speak for themselves. And it's what makes us think. Again, people don't understand words, they understand stories. So with that being said, I think we've built our 5 building blocks together here. And while I can't make you into a leader, I can't create leaders, all that's left to do at this point, I guess, is point out the openings so that the right person can say, that's where I want to be. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And we have a few minutes for questions. If any of you have any questions, I will roam on this side of the room. If you have questions, please raise your hand. We have just about time for, like I said, a couple before we move on to the final part of this day. Questions? All right, go for it.
Hello. First of all, great presentation.
Thank you.
So could you tell me a little bit about one of your most recent mistakes and how did you come to, make sure you share that you were actually empathetic and you were actually taking ownership without making it seem like a weakness? I think there's a bit of a balance there, and I think you hit the chord with your presentation.
Thank you. That's a really great question. I'm sort of like in the back of my head thinking of like maybe the right mistake, but one thing that I want to emphasize, you have this really great wording in your question where you said without framing it as a weakness. And so in what context would you not want something to be seen as a weakness? So like I lead a team right now of about like 5 people, some part-time people as well, right? With a team that small, I have the privilege of cultivating people where it's actually okay. In fact, there's no other way for me to do something than to be honest if I have a weakness. Like I'm 23 and I'm running a startup. So pretending, this is what I used to do, pretending that I don't have weaknesses and basically being like, oh yeah, you know, what I talked about earlier, the slippery leaders, right? Like, well, I evolved my position based on newest readings from user research. It's like, it doesn't really work. Like I'm leading a team of people with like more years of experience than I have like years on the planet. So they're gonna see through it. And it was super nerve wracking. It's like, why would these people follow me? But in, you know, just showing up every day, morning meetings, getting to know the team, I learned that, yeah, showing up for your mistakes and admitting that you have a weakness is like the only way that someone can then come and augment that, and you know, provide like the strength that the team needs to move forward, because it's really not about you, it's about the team. Second part of that question, what would be a mistake recently? I'll return to what I said earlier. Honestly, I make more mistakes than I do things right. Um, and honestly, like the last mistake that I made was I had a couple meetings in a row that I just missed with the same person. And there was no other way to show up by the time I sort of like missed this meeting for like the 3rd time, other than to just be like, hey, do you want to grill me? Like, do you want to grill me? Yeah, like, what can I say? I missed a meeting. Yeah, and she didn't, which is super awesome. Like, I don't think people really do, but as soon as you open up and like say like, hey, I can be accountable, then a lot of that like, you know, negativity that they might be putting on really not you, but the perception of you they have at that one moment sort of fades. I hope that answers your question.
All right.
There's-
Other question, last question that we might
There's
have?
a
Yep.
question from the audience that I'm trying to get, or from the virtual room that I'm trying to get clarification on.
Can we do 2 more then? Because I saw that they
Perfect.
had their hand up. Cool.
Great.
Thank you.
I'm getting clarification, and we'll come back to it.
Great.
All right.
Hi, that was a great presentation.
A little bit closer to your.
That was a great presentation. I wanted
Thank
to
you.
ask a little bit more about integrity. So when your integrity starts getting in the way, like you're working in a team, everybody stands by one thing. You're like, you know what? I'm not feeling this. How do you manage those situations? Because I found myself in those a few times. Um, just curious in your thoughts.
I want to make sure that I'm understanding the question correctly. So you're asking, what do you do when you're trying to stand by, you know, your moral compass and integrity is getting in the way? So like, okay, like we need to hit this target to, you know, stay alive as a company, using like startup examples, right? You can apply this to anything, but then it requires us to like lay somebody off who we just hired, or take an unsustainable approach to something, and I just won't, right? Is that sort of like, what do you do?
Right? Like we're going to put all this pressure on this person and push, 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 and you're like, this person's collapsing, but hey, we got to do this because as a team we got to survive. Like, you know, your moral compass is telling you otherwise, but like you said, we don't live in an ideal world, so sometimes those things start clashing. How do you personally get through those situations?
Okay, yeah, that's a really great question. Thank you, because it highlights the story I told around grit. So that's a mistake that I made, which was I tried to like create leaders like title, go through the door. You know what I mean? It doesn't work that way. So like if you have a situation where you need someone to work really hard, like yeah, most founders work up to 100-hour weeks. Like my co-founder and I lived that. It sucks. It does hurt people around you. It wasn't in line with our value, right? It was temporary, but it still sucked. But if you don't have team members who can understand that some of the values or these building blocks need to flex and bend kind of like a suspension bridge rather than like a brick wall, then, and you're pressuring them to work harder, then for one, you're not keeping the team intact. And for two, like, again, you can only open that space and wait for the right person if you're doing something that, you know, has strong values, a strong mission, somebody wants to work 100 hours on that for a time to see that change in the world. So I would ask yourself, like, if you're pushing someone to work this hard, then maybe you either need to reassess the project, or you need to reassess, you know, if you think that it's a reasonable ask, like they're a high management position, et cetera, you need to reassess, like, is this person right for the role, or am I like pushing them to be something that maybe they don't even want to be? Is a great question. Thank you.
The question from online is really about confidence, and how do you establish confidence when you're interacting with groups outside of yourself, where when you automatically enter those atmospheres, your confidence gets diminished right away. So how do you continue to maintain that confidence and establish it moving
The
forward?
asker says when they enter those types of atmospheres, their confidence diminishes right away.
Correct. So just maintaining that confidence and establishing it throughout.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so like remember like Pizza Shop me, the one that's like really sad. So I came out as trans. I worked at a pizza shop, and honestly, really good pizza. But but that's besides the point. And so I had a customer-facing job like every day, and you know I might be beautiful now, but back then, you know, there were some rough edges as like I didn't look how I felt inside. And so every interaction I had was just like plastic knife slash, plastic knife slash, like getting killed with like a spoon. You know what I mean? Like just the slow, it just sucks. Like any person who's like other or, you know, a minority in a place where you're not welcome, like, you know, this feeling. It's just every interaction like takes a toll. And, you know, I transitioned like about a little over 2 years ago. So like you sort of build up like a tolerance by putting yourself in those situations. But there's really like no easy answer for this. Like I earned my confidence through being thrown into the frying pan and then just like finding a way through. Like that's the honest answer. So I would say you have to put yourself in those situations where you feel uncomfortable. And you might hear this sentiment floating around a lot, like discomfort or actually comfort, right? Comfort is the enemy of progress and growth. So it can be a very hard truth when the thing that's in question is your own validity as a human. But, you know, I would hope that if this talk does anything, or my work with Spriteley does anything, is to show you that someone like me, or not just trans people, but anybody who feels like other, like you can get to a place where you're living your best life, where you're killing it, where you're just glowing. And you got to find your own path there, but it's possible. Like, just keep going. Yeah.
All right. And with this, actually, I would, if I may, in 30 seconds, just a quick question.
Sure.
I'll putting my hat of business school professor here.
Sure.
And when we teach leadership, there's one thing that I haven't heard from your presentation, and you alluded to your being Gen Z, and
Yes.
you know the bad reputation out there at Gen Z is like, well, you know, they want a trophy just for showing up, right? And you know, you have to encourage them and tell them how good they are all the time. And that was not really part of your presentation. How do you encourage? How do you is constant praising, constant reward something that has to be part of leadership, in your opinion?
I love this question so much, dude. Thank you. Thank you. So, okay, yeah, I'm like on the later side of Gen Z. And yeah, there's a lot of rap going around certain circles. We all know what we're talking about here. Certain circles that, you know, everyone in my generation, we want a medal just for showing up. You know, at the end of the day, like, sure, if you want to think that, like, go for it. I don't have a deep knowledge about like sort of like, you know, middle school like soccer psychology. So I don't know like if that's detrimental or not. As a leader though, I would just say I don't praise when there's nothing to praise. So maybe I have sort of a retro mentality around that, but like this isn't soccer, middle school soccer. This is leadership. This is startups on like the world scale. So no one is helping you by saying like, oh yeah, great job, you killed it. And then you go to like see how that thing then does in the market or in front of investors and it fails. So that's way more painful. I would just say, like, for Gen Z, yes, sometimes people do want a medal for showing up, but look a bit closer, and a lot of the times, those are going to be the people who have been beaten down so hard that they just want a medal. Like, there comes a point when, like, the world is a little bit against you, and I don't think it's such a bad thing to, like, want praise. I think that's very human, and that's integral to, like, each of us. So just imagine somebody who hasn't gotten that and think about how important that is. Well, thank you.
Koii Benvenutto, thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much. I really appreciate it.
Fantastic.